I'd like to start with something that's been mentioned about your work, and the image that comes to mind, or I guess through the word, the image that comes to mind is this question of enigmatic and the authenticity, another phrase, the authenticity of life experience, I guess. And I'm kind of curious about, if we ask the question, as we so often do, where does an artist come from? I mean, what motivates them to become an artist in the first place? Everybody has a different approach to that, but I'm kind of curious what yours might be.
My origins as an artist?
Yeah, what brought you to make art? You know, what caused you to imagine becoming an artist?
Well, when I was 5, we had a house in the country, and we had a screened large front porch where we all often had dinner in the summer. And that particular evening we had some guests that I knew well because they were hanging out with us all the time. And everybody was way, way far away somewhere in the house. It felt to me like there was no one present but myself. And the weather, there was an amazing weather development outside. And so I ran outside. I loved spending time outside when I was a kid. This was Maryland in the farm country. And I ran outside and I saw a fireball rolling right across my vision. It looked like it was on the edge of the horizon line, and it was huge. And I ran back inside after that event to find people, and I yelled at them what I had just seen, and they looked at me and they laughed. Like they took no impression whatsoever from what I said, except for one of the guests, and he came out with me on the porch. It almost makes me cry thinking about it. And he said, "You're very special. You have an eye for seeing things." And I think it confirmed to me that I was special in that way. So, I mean, that's an event I always remember. And I looked it up phenomenologically, like, is it possible? And of course they do exist, but they're very rare. Mm-hmm. So it was partly the art came through my isolation of being isolated from people that didn't really want to listen to me. And then the legitimacy that I was given to go ahead and do what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So I think that stuck with me like through my whole life.
Mm-hmm. Coming back to that word enigmatic or enigma, would be something very enigmatic about such an experience. It would be so out of the ordinary.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you think that it was that particular quality of that image that stuck with you? And
well, for one thing, it was incredibly powerful because it had come from nowhere, and I couldn't have said this is going to happen. I mean, and it filled me with intensity. So, yeah, that's a really great example of an enigma for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And of course, turning to the other thing, the person who, in a sense, corroborated the legitimacy of your imagination, or at least of your perception, whichever, that would tend to suggest to you, I imagine, from that early age, a sense that you were, to put it baldly, you were right, that there was something authentic or something core to the experience that you could take forward.
That's right, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you get so little confirmation in your life at that age. If you have parents like I had, which would just laugh at it, they would just laugh at me or forget about me or whatever. So that would be what I would have looked for as a response to my work, would be the person who did confirm that I had given them something that they could really relate to. So I was always looking for that in viewers. You know, if it was art school, it was the teacher that would take it seriously, or the friend in the art class or whatever. And then throughout my career, you know, the key people given. I had no doubts about it whatsoever. I did not think about a career. It didn't even cross my mind. I don't know what I was thinking about how I would make money or what I would extend my taking care of myself, how I would do that. I just didn't think about it. It was just very exciting to me to do that, so that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, then you waitress or whatever, or count cars by billboards for somebody's, I don't know. So it was never a doubt. And so the career came as I worked. I mean, the career developed sort of on its own. And of course I had times when I couldn't afford to take public transit, so I would walk 2 hours to get to a meeting, or there were those times when you just are like flat out broke, but still I never doubted that I would do that.
Mm-hmm. Am I correct that you studied philosophy at NASCAD?
I did. I studied philosophy at NASCAD. That was my graduate degree. Mm-hmm. And that was never a sway from art for me. It was a development of art. Mm. And the reason how I ended up there was, it would have been 75, and at Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, we were doing seminars where we were reading art forum articles that quoted Wittgenstein and all of these structuralist analyses and post-structuralists, and that was in the air and everybody was talking about it. And so I would read these art forum articles and they wouldn't make any sense to me. But I thought kind of what was being said about them was interesting. So I thought to myself, well, geez, if I really want to get this stuff, maybe I should study it. So that led me to Dalhousie University in the Department of Philosophy, where they were doing analytical. What they did at the time was analytic philosophy, and Wittgenstein was one of the primary courses. So I spent 2 years studying philosophy. At the same time, I had a double life because I was doing art on the side, and I was still showing as a very, very young artist. But I didn't kind of tell the philosophy professors about it because I didn't think they'd take me seriously or something. So I had this kind of double life. But then when I finished philosophy grad school, I went back and read some of those old art forum articles, and they did not make sense. So it was like complete nonsense, really. So I don't know how people were supposed to understand it.
That's hilarious. Well, I guess that leads me inevitably to ask whether theory in its many guises and discourses and articulations actually is part of your practice, at least part of the input to your practice.
Theory was really important to my practice in the 80s, and I used to even write proposals based on Adorno or Habermas, or philosophers that were really, really interested in getting at the contrast between how we're alienated from reality through these social structures. And so a piece like the Western Gothic, even though it's not overall highly theoretical, in my mind it was. So I did keep up a lot of readings and kept doing that. But I find that over the years, the basic core of philosophy is still with me, but it's very, very much less present in my art. So I talk about Merleau-Ponty a lot and phenomenology in my teaching, because I think it's a really great way for people to understand the body and perception and how art works in our experience. But I don't ever address it specifically when I'm kind of developing a piece anymore. I don't know what comes. Of course, that's sort of the general development of art in 2016 now.
Mm-hmm. As an aside, I guess, to that, actually, Sandra, one hears about so often the question, but is it relevant to the zeitgeist?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you have any thoughts about that demand. Very often is a demand.
Well, if it's relevant to the zeitgeist, it's relevant to the zeitgeist. You can't do anything about it, or you can't try to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So you might as well just do what you want to do. And I guess that's my simple take on that thing. I know it exists, and I don't think it's good or bad. It's just there.
Mm-hmm. Both the idea of zeitgeist and, of course, the larger body of theory tends to suggest another element entirely, which is art history, which is imbued often with theory, and certainly it rests often on some form of ideological attachment. Do you have any views on art history with respect to your work?
Only I read art history. I mean, I pay attention to art history, and I have favorite historical artists, and I have no interest in my own work in relation to art history, because my own work isn't historical yet.
We all enter into history sooner or later, but is there, and this is just a curious question perhaps, is there a particular historical era that you feel attached to? I think we all sort of, I could say I'm attached to the Baroque perhaps.
Oh, okay.
Do you have any sense like that? Any fondness, I guess you could call it?
If I had to pinpoint, it would probably be the 50s. And it would probably be New York. It would be the location of it. But I also love Paris in the 1890s. So I guess those two things would be my highlights.
Yeah, that's interesting. Often people would quote the 60s when it comes to New York.
I think I'm pre that. Like, it's funny for me because I won't say I grew up with this in New York in the 60s, but in the very early 70s, I took frequent trips to New York because we had a free place to stay there, the college. So the 70s, I remember the art very well, but I don't know, maybe it's because what preceded it in the 50s is more exotic to me because I don't know it. So I'm always more reading about that, right? And looking it up and going to shows of earlier artists.
It's almost like the lost times, isn't it? The 50s. Interesting. Perhaps we can turn to back to the question of audience, really. And you said a few minutes ago some quite interesting things about how meaningful audience is to you, how meaningful it is for there to be some kind of authentic connection between the audience and yourself. Can you expand on that at all? In terms of, I guess, the kind of audience you would most see as appropriate to your work?
I don't identify any specific kind of audience for being ideal. It's a very enigmatic concept, isn't it? Because
That's true.
I mean, here I am. I'm making things, objects. I'm in my private space, and it's all going on. But ultimately, I know if that work is successful, and if I personally deem it successful, then it goes out to the world. And so I suppose it's an abstraction of who the audience is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of thinking of eyes and bodies and movements and brains and everything experiencing the piece. So I've had 10-year-old children that are amazed, and then I've had people off the street that are amazed. So you never, I guess that's maybe
Sometimes curators.
sometimes curators, but that's maybe the answer is you just never know who your audience is going to be and who's going to be hit by it in a great way. And sometimes your expectations are for such and such a curator and they're not responding. So that's that.
You have said that one of the things that you do enjoy or look forward to enjoying from an audience or from a public or from a viewer is their ability to come close to the work. And you even said to walk slowly by it or words to that effect. Is it that closeness that you would like to see a viewer?
Well, for sure, I want to slow people down out of their busyness and captivate a moment for them. And so a close look for sure would be, or I guess it could be a quick look, but something that would stand out as a memory for a really long time after that, because I have done that too, where I've, for some reason, seen a piece but not really considered it till I remembered it as I experienced it, and that's pretty striking too. But I think as an artist, one always wants someone to look at the work that will be fully immersed and not thinking about what they're going to have for lunch or something. So.
Back to I don't mean to dwell too long on the question of the viewer, but when you talk or when somebody talks on your behalf about the invitation to enchantment, at what level do you see enchantment occurring, or how do you see it being engineered, or what do you think that the viewer is going to take away from it that would be in some respects a form of enchantment?
For me, enchantment is completely giving over to the experience. So if you're Alice in Wonderland and you're wandering through Wonderland, you're absolutely there. That's and it's an experience that you've never had before. So that's what I never say that, but I know that people have said that. So that's what I understand that they're getting at is it provides an experience that you can give yourself over to and not know what you're seeing, but make discoveries as you're having the experience. And I mean, I'm sure there are elements of storytelling because I have told stories through my work that's another kind of enchantment because you don't know what's going to happen in the story. But I would hope that somehow if it's painting, a square red painting that you see from across the room, that's pretty understandable. But I would hope that when you get up close to it at least, you would be enchanted by something about it that you've never seen before, or maybe you've never seen read like that before, or something like that.
I have to say that when one goes to your website and you're confronted with the figure, the face that turns its eyes both ways, I'd have to say that's a wonderful form of enchantment that I hardly expected.
There you go, that's great.
But also raises something else, Sandra, and maybe I can put it this way. Of course, one is always interested to know what the fundament of an artist's working practice and self-understanding might be. And there are so many answers that an artist can give, or somebody can place before the artist. But I have to say that selecting all the possibilities, the question of comedy or humor comes to me. And it's a very particular kind of sense of comedy. And I don't know really quite how to define that sense of comedy that you bring to your work. Any thoughts?
I know where my comedy comes from, and it's my childhood. I love finding those points of clash between expectations and results, and because I love visual images so much, it comes to me through the stuff that I paint sometimes. No, I mean not always, but I think that there's maybe a way I would describe it is it's a bit haunting. Like sometimes it's deeply embedded in the painting somehow. You don't see it right away, but then it kind of like slowly emerges to you. And I also really enjoy people and their behaviors and ways and attitudes and things like that. So, I mean, that'll fascinate you. You don't even have to read a book or watch a movie. You could just go watch people.
The degree to which there is this private-public imbalance or attempt to construct something stretching between the two that the clown represents. So I take clowns quite seriously. And I wonder if the notion of the clown as an iconic figure is of interest to you.
Well, I completely understand what you're saying about the private emotion and then the public face. In spite of that, I do find that very powerful. And I never really identified specifically with clowning. I haven't really studied that. Something about the illusion present in the clown's behavior, the tricks, and I love slapstick, and I loved Lucille Ball. I watched tons of television when I was a kid because I hung out at home with my mother, and they would get me every time. So in slapstick, I think I do put some of that in my work, visual slapstick. Of course, with that website page, what do you call those pages? Homepage.
Right.
Of course, it's there right off the bat, and I love laughing to myself when I do a show that's really funny. I just really love that.
Yes, I'd like to come to the work that I was alluding to a little bit earlier, the basement panoramas, because it was with respect to that work, I think, that you talked about your feeling that it was important for a viewer to walk slowly past it and to give themselves over to look closely at the work. Do you want to talk about that work at all?
Yeah, I wanted to make painting that was not possible to experience, that you could not stand back from it and look at it. And the reason for that is I was doing meditation. I had just started meditation, and I had learned this mindful walking practice where you really slow motion. So you're very aware of your foot going heel and toe, and it's like you're in slow motion. You don't speak to anyone, and you're in nature. So I practiced that for a while after my husband died, and I had no idea that it would bring such an intense experience, because what it does is you're aware of every waft of wind on your skin, or you see a dewdrop on a leaf that you wouldn't normally see. So it's a very heightened intensity of experience itself. So in terms of walking those paintings, that was really the model for me that I had in mind. And in mindful walking, you don't stand back from the forest and look at it. You are deeply immersed in each action that your body takes through it. So I wanted to try to get at that for a visual experience of something that I created for the viewer. And that's where the idea of walking the paintings came from. So I started my interest in murals, looking at historic murals, and thinking that, well, these are architectural paintings that relate to a space, and wherever you're sitting in the space, or whatever the space was for, you would have an urge at least to get up close to them and experience them from different viewpoints within the space. I mean, that's a standard thing for all art, but I really wanted to accentuate it so that you were almost conscious of it as an experience. So I went to the university in New Hampshire, Dartmouth, is it Dartmouth, where the Orozco murals are, and they have a beautiful reference library with an original Orozco. So you're in there, and you're in a reading room with at least 20 enormous long reading tables with chairs, and you're surrounded by these amazing pictures on the wall that are incredibly intense. I spent a whole week there. I went every day and sat. So I don't know how people forget about them, that they're in there. But so that was kind of my introduction to my research into mural paintings. And the result was the basement panoramas, of which the widest one is 47 feet.
I want to come back to, and I don't know why I'm making this connection, but I want to come back to your website introduction image and those eyes that go back and forth. Mm-hmm. And there's something, what it constructs, besides a sense of humor, is a sense of the furtive, a sense of watchfulness. Mm-hmm. Is that intentional, or how did you come to do that?
Well, that particular image is one of a few, like 20, 30 units that are all the same size and all the same basic image, and it's called the resin heads. But in the installation of that piece, all the eyes were looking to the right. So it was in response. I have to tell you where the piece came from. It was from being an academic administrator, because I was chair of my department at the time, and I went to so many meetings where there were really, really important questions, but nobody really wanted to provide any answers or solutions, so everybody just looked to somebody to say something, right? And so they're the resin heads, they're speechless, and they're just looking to the next guy to get the work done. So it was a phenomenally funny piece to me, because it was from such a personal experience. But then, so you were in the middle of the space as a viewer, and you had all these forms heads around you, but none of them were looking at you, so you were kind of out. So when I put that, I just, you want something really simple that'll be punchy like that, so that's where that came from, the eyeballs going this way and that way.
Sandra, you have a long career, and it's an amazing body of work, because there are shifts and changes every time one comes to one of your exhibitions. Is there a strategy that you have, or is there some way in which you understand the shifts from one body of work to another?
Yeah, I absolutely always, I get it, but I don't expect other people to get it, right? I mean, for me, it develops, there's kind of a synergism from what I guess would be the content of the work more than the form of the work. And so I think about what the essence of the basement panoramas was, grief, and how to sort of express 4 very, very key stages of grief for me, and that's what each of those paintings addressed for me. One was breath, to learn to breathe again. One was mortality, when you finally realize you're gonna die. The other was insomnia, where you are completely restless and can't settle your mind. And then the last one was transformation. So I got to the last one, it was transformation, and I really did literally feel transformed. So I was ready to do something intensely expressive of that joy that you feel when you're ready for whatever. So that led me to all. So in my mind, yeah, they're really tightly connected. And for the viewer, I can totally understand. You're like seeing something, where did this come from? Like from that. So I don't think, I mean, in our history we study the artist's oeuvre and how this led to that and that led to that, but I don't know, I think you'd have to know more about the core of each of those pieces if you wanted to understand that, rather than sort of the form. But then, like as you say, there are things like humor that maybe, I mean, I guess the basement panoramas definitely wasn't funny, but there's some very funny twists in those paintings, I think. So, I mean, I think there are kind of core essences of me in all of those works.
So is there a particular kind of criticism that you find most productive for yourself?
Well, I get most out of when a writer will spend time with me, and maybe even over the course of several days get to know me, and then get a deeper understanding of where the work comes from. And I mean, that's always a lot of work, and you don't always have the wonderful advantage of that opportunity. it doesn't happen that often. But I think that is really great. But on the other hand, there have been people that have come to the show, not talked to me, and then wrote about it from their own perspective, which is obviously what you want a viewer to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes they can just be very fresh
Mm-hmm.
and really great, because after all, there is no one reading of a work. There's no one sequence of looking at a work, or there's no one experience. So I have really rarely had things written about my work that I didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I can disagree with things
Mm-hmm.
from a. I mean, it's hard to say they were misreading the work,
Mm-hmm.
because who am I to say, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, normally I think any words are great because they express something about the work.
Mm-hmm. First, let me ask about the collector. You don't have to spend too much time on that, but I'm just kind of curious what experience you've had with collectors, and if there's a particular kind of collector that you enjoy meeting or having them examine your work.
Well, there was I had a recent experience with a collector. So when I had the all-to-all exhibition, I was in Toronto and I was in the gallery every day, and there was art fair on, so tons of people were coming through. And I had these cookie tins that rotated and made noise, and so people really liked them. They're just fun, but they didn't quite know what to make of them. And I really enjoyed hanging out with people in that space, because you rarely do that, right? Mm-hmm. So there were 3 people, and they were from Calgary, and they were going along one by one looking at all of them, and I just asked them which one they liked. And they said, this one. And I said, well, that one has a squash ball in it making that sound. And he said, I play squash. And then so, anyway, he ended up purchasing it for his collection. And I felt really just so great, because we had this little conversation, and I knew it was really fun. And then unfortunately the piece broke, so he had to send me photographs of it to ask me how to fix it. So I got to see it installed in his house. And that was really rewarding, to see the place where people are living around it. I actually did fix it, so that's good. But or if you see your work or paintings purchased by a gallery, a museum, and when I had read 3011 Jackson Street Mortality purchased at the National Gallery, and then I went to see it installed in the gallery, and I saw people interacting with it. That was really, really rewarding too, because I knew it had a good home, and I knew that people were looking at it. But as an institution, I don't get the same closeness to the collector. You don't meet a person, you meet the institution.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to meet more people that include my work in their personal collections. That would be very rewarding.
And we can talk about teaching. And of course you have a long career as a teacher as well. And the many students that you've met quite directly and even intimately and personally around the question of their work. What would you say is the most productive and enjoyable aspect of teaching for you?
Well, the reason why I love teaching is people are making such amazing stuff, and it's always new. It's always, for me, it's always a new generation of people. And so it forces me to see the world and to stay young and to keep up with ideas and currency in art ideas. But to see a person explode with, oh, I want to make this, which is like, well, I don't know what you're talking about, to actually then making it and actually seeing it, and wow, that's amazing. I'm so glad you made that, because I couldn't understand what you were talking about. But I mean, that's a privilege to be close to that kind of creative production. So that's probably what I love about teaching. There's a lot of downsides to it too.
As to anything, what about reading? Is there a particular kind of reading that you enjoy?
I like dramatic fiction with great stories and characters, and I like historic fiction. And I'm always reading a novel. It just keeps me entertained, but I like to sort of not pair it with, but in a parallel I'll read some idea or something I want to learn more about. So at the moment I'm really interested in quantum physics, and I realize that you can't understand it. I mean, even Einstein's wife never knew what he was talking about, and she was a mathematician. She said, no, I never really did understand the quantum field. So I found a book that's written, it's like quantum physics for dummies. I mean, it's called the color field, because he tries to make it comprehensible using color as a model. And I'm finding it's really brilliant. So I love being led or educated to an area where, you know, I'll have different things I'm really interested in. So at the moment it's quantum physics, so I'm trying to learn about that in a way that I could actually explain it to you, which is, I don't know, we'll see.
I think we all, anyone who has known artists and artists themselves become aware pretty soon of the pressures involved in being an artist, in trying to operate as an artist. And so, you know, I suppose an obvious question might be, given the longevity of your own career, Sandra, how you've found yourself dealing with pressures, the career pressures of being an artist, but also the pressures that result from your relationship with others. And very often, of course, in your own domestic environment, your more intimate relations. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's very important when thinking about the pressures of the career to not think about it, to forge ahead and do what you want to do regardless of what you feel might be expected of you as an artist at that moment. So yeah, that's the fear. What am I going to do next? Am I going to wow them with this next project? Well, like, just forget about it and make what you need to make in that moment, because I have spent a year making something that in the end I think was a sidetrack for me, and that's just to be expected. It's a way to develop. So that's what I try to do, and that's really one of the benefits for me of being here in Victoria, is I feel completely free because nobody's around to watch. So And then I love surprising people. And I have really looked at my successes in my career as icing on the cake. Like, it's just wonderful, but you forge ahead, you know, whatever might happen or not happen. So, as far as the difficulty with how it affects your relations with others, I don't know that I have had enormous pressure that way. I know that my dear beloved Paul, who passed away, and he was a barkeep. He owned and maintained his own bar, and he didn't have a hoot what my art was about. And so that was not part of our relationship. I mean, he respected me and he bragged about my accomplishments to his friends and stuff, but he would just go like that, you know? And so that was kind of a fun thing for me, in that I got to talk to somebody who it wasn't about art all the time. So I think you have to for sure feel secure that, you know, he's not rejecting my work because he doesn't get it or something. Yeah, I don't know what other kind of relationships might have been impeded by it. I know maybe it would be worth mentioning that I have many women friends who made a decision not to have children because they thought that would be an impediment to their ability to develop their career. And for me, it has been nothing but a joy. It has fed my ideas. So I've learned so much from bringing up an infant to adulthood. I've learned so much about creativity in that process. Yeah.
Sandra, thanks so much.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure.